As the title says, I am going to talk about support verb constructions and very specifically about the documentary Papyri. So it's very lucky for me that Maya was just before me and already introduced you to that. That makes my life a lot easier. There are three things I sort of want to get across today. Support verb constructions form a quite internally heterogeneous group of constructions. They are highly susceptible to diatopic, diachronic, or diastratic variation, and they largely withstand any automated or even semi-automated procedure of data collection. So in that sense, you may be slightly disappointed that I ended up in the NLP panel, because you will see it involves quite a lot of manual labor to extract these structures, particularly from the documentary Papyri. So I'm showing you on the slide very briefly what I am going to use the 20 minutes I have allocated for. I'm going to start by talking very briefly about what I understand by support verb constructions. They definitely are, terminologically speaking, a minefield, and more than anything, I want us to be on the same page. I want you to be able to follow along with my line of argument. You're very welcome to disagree with me, and I'd be interested to hear. So this is not in the sense of a complete research recap or anything like this. It is just to enable you to follow along, and please do criticize if you disagree with my definition. I'll introduce you to the three research questions I'm going to try and answer today, and to the 2.5 data sets I have and my method of data collection. I promise the half data set will become clear as we go along. And the next three headers on the slide just refer to basically the three research questions, so internal heterogeneity, deterministic approaches, and synchronic and diachronic diversity. If those at the moment don't make a lot of sense to you, that is completely fine, and I promise they will become clearer as we go along. And I'll finish, hopefully on time, with a brief summary and conclusion, which is basically just looping it back to the research questions and very explicitly answering them in order, hopefully, to catapult us into a good summary and conclusion section. Question and answer section afterwards, sorry. Right, then let me start by telling you a little bit about what I understand by support verb constructions. I'll keep this basic and very much to the point of what I want to look at today. If you're interested in this further, please do ask in the question and answer afterwards. So broadly speaking, support verb constructions are things like to have an idea. They are, lexically speaking, verbal multi-word expressions. So you have multiple lexemes forming that kind of phrasing or that construction. And syntactically speaking, they are complex predicates. So they fill, kind of these multiple lexemes fill the predicate slot in your sentence. If you're working with something like lexical functional grammar, you could think about they fill 2 slots in the C structure, but only 1 in the F structure. So there's this kind of mismatch. I have 2 examples on the slide, to have an idea and to have something in mind. If we use to have no idea as an example to start with, so what constitutes that support verb construction is that you have an eventive noun, idea, you have a supporting verb, my have, and in English I then need a determiner phrase, really any determiner phrase in this support verb construction. To have the idea would equally work. Now, these are kind of support verb constructions that consist of a verb and an object. Today, we're actually going to be more interested in the second example I have on the slide, something along the lines of to have something in mind. So you again have an eventive noun, or a noun that can at least be reconceptualized as eventive. You have a supporting verb, and you have an abstracted preposition in there. The something is just a dummy object I inserted, because otherwise I violate too many rules of English. Now, rather than talking you through a lot of theory on how to exactly draw the line around support verb constructions, which is hard enough, I thought I show you 3 examples to illustrate what kind of an eventive noun, a supporting verb, an abstracted preposition are. And I show you 3 examples that kind of wouldn't make the cut, so that wouldn't actually tick the boxes for me to be included in the data collection. If you look in the lower right corner, as it were, where I say but not. So to have a child would not be a support verb construction with me. I kept an eye on the attendance list because I know there are a lot of people that disagree very vehemently with me on that one. So I probably will not face too much criticism today, but as I say, if you're further interested, please do ask. I can point you to the people who disagree. A child for me would be a kind of a referential kind of noun. I can't reconceptualize as eventive, so it's not something like to take a picture where the picture in that support verb construction suddenly refers to the process rather than the result. The child kind of, for me, that kind of reconceptualization doesn't work. So I would say this is not a support verb construction because the noun is not eventive. To hit the ball is not a support verb construction because hit is just not a supporting verb. You can see that quite nicely if you think about anaphora phenomena. If you kind of had any kind of anaphoric expression afterwards, after to hit the ball in the text, you could refer back to the hitting, but you shouldn't be able to do that with a support verb. So something like, with to have an idea, you couldn't refer back to the have, you can only refer back to the idea. And the final one, to hold something in one's hand, and there the preposition is not abstracted because obviously in here refers to a very specific physical location in one's hand. And so those three would not make the cut. Now, what I'm going to be talking about for the remainder of this is the kind of frame you have in the upper right corner in my little orangey box. So we're going to look at echo, to have, the preposition in, and then an eventive noun, which should be inflected as a dative case in Greek. However, obviously, if you look at kind of papyrological or kind of specifically at the documentary papyri, that kind of data, we do have to make allowances to a certain extent. So that is what support verb constructions are. Let me briefly show you the three questions I will try to answer. So the first one is, what makes support verb constructions actually withstand automated or even semi-automated procedures of data retrieval and makes them thus quite burdensome to investigate? The second one is, how can support verb construction, however, be retrieved in suitably large, internally homogeneous and digitally available corpora? And I will show you one such corpus that you can play around with yourself as well. And why are support verb constructions so difficult to identify and really let alone discover? We're not going to really talk about discovering in the documentary papyri. That's a question you're probably all here for, and I will keep up the suspense and make you wait for that one for quite a bit. Creativity was not exactly my strong suit. Nautical, Attic, historiography, oratory, and prose. It's about 500,000 words. You can implement that corpus into I kind of published that together with a code. It's open access, and if you say again, is it cutting out for you?
Yeah, it was somehow frozen for quite some time.
Ooh, okay, where did you lose me?
10 seconds.
Where did you, so if I just go one slide back, were you still okay with the research questions?
Yes,
that
I think so. Yes.
Okay, great. Then I just talk you briefly through the data samples, don't worry. Right, so since I have unfrozen UK internet and all of that, right? So I have two data samples that we are going to play with today. The half one I'll show you in a moment. The first one, which I very inventively called the ECF Leverhulme corpus, is a corpus of literary, classical, Attic, historiography, oratory, and prose. And you can analyze that by means of Sketch Engine. You can implement that there. Our code, or I built this kind of with a colleague from Cambridge, and he's the computer scientist on the team. So unfortunately, like Maya earlier, I have to say I didn't bring the computer science person. So if you're interested more in the coding aspect, I will have to redirect you to him. But our code base is open access, so do please feel free to play around with it or also try it on your own texts. My caveat is that you can use it for definitely literary classical Attic. It should run on things like Ionic. It should even still run on things like later Polybius. It does not run on papyrological data. That is where we come to data sample number 2, the Duke database of documentary papyri. And you can search this by means of this search interface on papyri.info, which comes with its limitations. If you have ever worked with that before, you will know that things like lemmatization don't always exactly work as you expect them to, but you can use it, you can search it, and that's also what I have done, and you can manually correct. So the way I then collected data in both these samples was that I searched for the lemma echo to have within 5 words of the lemma n. And then I manually corrected for constructions in which the noun is not eventive or the preposition is not abstracted. And that is how you get through it. You can, with the ECF Lieberschon corpus, you can ask Sketch Engine to draw up a collocational table. With the Duke database of documentary papyri, you need to do a little bit more of like manual analysis. So with this, let me move on to the first research questions. What makes support verb constructions withstand semi-automated or then even automated procedures of data retrieval? And what I'm showing you here is actually neither of the 2 data samples, neither of the 2 Greek data samples, but just like items taken from the British National Corpus, mainly because what makes support verb construction so complicated for automated or semi-automated procedures of data retrieval is something that's not Greek specific in any way, but that's quite kind of a common problem, or there are basically 3 issues. They're quite ambiguous, they're discontinuous, and they are variable. I'll briefly talk you through all 3 aspects. So they are ambiguous in that if you compare my examples under 1, I have in my hand, and she had herself in hand. The first one would not be a support verb construction with our possessive triggers, right? A sort of a referential meaning. In my hand is physical location. The second one, to have yourself in hand, that is a support verb construction. There you do have this reconceptualization. But obviously you can't, generally speaking, disallow determinative phrases or something like that. So that kind of ambiguity is just inherent. The second is that support verb constructions, at least a lot of them, can be discontinuous. And that is also where obviously my 5-word limit between items comes from. I show you on the slide 1 where you have 3 items intervening. I've had something like it in mind. Obviously, this discontinuity is mainly a problem because if you have any other noun or preposition in that space between your predicative noun and support verb, then that creates some kind of like ambiguity of which noun or which verb should be linked. Obviously, with something like if the texts are tree banked properly, as you've heard from Maya earlier, then that would be something where we would kind of be able to take quite a step forward. And finally, support verb constructions are quite variable, at least those that tend towards the analytic side of things and not towards the synthetic side of things. I show you 2 types of variability on the slide. That is definitely not all there is. So the first one is to have something in mind, which you, in the example here, has been turned in. They had certain things in their minds. So you add a possessive determinative phrase, and you you pluralize the predicative noun, and that works just fine. You can also often add an attributive phrase to the predicative noun. You see an extreme example at the bottom, so to hold in far higher, etc., esteem. That kind of, I retrieved the examples from about the first 100 instances in the BNC. So you see these kind of the attributive phrases clustered to a certain extent. They are degree adjectives. You can turn them to comparative and superlative, but obviously they are still rather hard to predict. So that is, generally speaking, what makes support verb constructions quite difficult to retrieve automatically or semi-automatically. Let me move on to question number 2. So how can support verb constructions be retrieved in suitably large, internally homogeneous and digitally available corpora? Now, Obviously, that is not where we're going to talk about the papyri, because they are neither a suitably large nor an internally homogeneous corpus. And while they are digitally available, that's maybe the only box they tick. So I will show you what you can do with, for example, that ECF Leverhulme corpus, which is actually fully tagged and which is also kind of or tagged for support verb constructions very specifically, I should say that, and which you obviously can also implement in Sketch Engine and have Sketch Engine do quite a lot of your work. So what you find if you run the frame I'm interested in, N and echo plus eventive noun, is that that frame is quite regularly used to talk about emotions. I'm showing you a random example on the slide. So to be enraged, en orge, acon. That is what it's quite commonly used for. Now, my procedure of data collection is obviously that I search for 2 lemmata and I allow for 5 words in between. And so far, I've just put that to you and hoped that no one will object to that. Now, obviously, I miss out on certain instances. And that is what I show you in number 5 with made-up examples. A kind of structure that's quite common in this frame is en nor echo, to have something in mind. Now, if I had things like pronominalization, so the mind sort of in which, or the mind in it, in that, I have, that is possible with some support verb constructions, but something like this I'm not going to catch if not by chance the distance is small enough. I'm also not going to catch anything where, for some reason, for some kind of, I don't know, relative clause or so, the distance between the support verb and the predicative noun is larger than 5 words. So that's the limitation that I have to accept. If I make the distance larger, if I say I allow for 10 intervening items, for example, then I just drive up the number of false positives, and hence I also drive up the amount of manual correction I have to do. What you see in this kind of literary classical articorpus overall is that support verb constructions do reflect the principle of iconicity, so that items that functionally belong together appear close to each other in the surface representation. Now, obviously, you can say, well, why do you then take these 5 items into the papyrological data? That is a fair point of criticism, and I completely accept that. And my answer would be that I just don't want to drive the false positives up too much. Now, the final thing that even in a corpus like this, the final problem you have even in a corpus like this is the ambiguity. My favorite item is dexia, which means has the referential meaning right hand. But in support verb constructions, at least in verb object structures, usually means truce or treaty. So to give a truce, to have a truce, to make a truce, etc. Now, in the frame we're interested in my N and echo, it actually kind of keeps that referential meaning. It usually means to have something to the right or on the right-hand side, something like Xenophanes anabasis or so. So that ambiguity you do have to kind of edit out or correct out manually, because there's no determiner phrase that kind of pushes for the referential meaning, or no attributive phrase either. Like if you just look at it, you actually think, oh, would that work? And it definitely doesn't. So what you can do clearly is you can retrieve them by means of sort of a deterministic approach, right? You kind of search for 2 lemmata with a specific distance of intervening items, but there are limitations to what works even in a corpus like this. Let me move on to question number 3, and to a corpus that is definitely not at all internally homogeneous or kind of anything like it. And that is the question is, why are support verb constructions so difficult to identify and, as I say, let alone discover in the documentary papyri? What I've done is I have searched the Duke database of documentary papyri for exactly the frame for our N plus eventive noun plus echo. So I basically searched for N and echo and allowed for a distance of 5 words, and obviously allowed for any eventive noun. And I can tell you there's a lot of manual correction involved there, but you do get to quite a good sample over the course of the Ptolemaic, Roman, and early Byzantine period. So you do get around 400 instances that are actually relevant. What is very interesting, and was probably also part of the problem, is obviously that kind of support verb constructions, as I said at the beginning, are quite susceptible to any kind of diachronic, diastratic, diatopic variations. And that's what you see evidenced quite a lot in the documentary papyri. And that makes the task of identifying, or then let alone discovering them, quite hard. So obviously my frame is quite deterministic. What you find is kind of in terms of register, they do appear actually, interestingly enough, quite regularly in these kind of lower level administrative texts. One that appears quite frequently you have on the slide for kind of as an example, and myths they echo to have on loan. The numbers afterwards refer to like how many instances there are in Ptolemaic, Roman, and early Byzantine texts. You do also see, if you compare that to my literary classical Attic corpus, there's diachronic development, something like enor echo, which is reasonably frequent in the classical Attic corpus, appears just about once in the papyri. Otherwise, they seem to use rather something like ensterno echo to have in mind, or literally something like at heart, but it seems to fulfill the same function, where you could say, is that like lexical renewal that is at work here? And finally, what is very interesting when you look at a frame like this, you can actually compare syntactic and lexical normalizations, and that is what I have under number 9. So you get quite a lot of pairs, such as the one in asphale, so n plus nominalized adjective, and then echo, as opposed to n asphalea, where we have a lexical noun with a derivational ending. Now, while I would like to tell you a lot more about the difference between lexical and syntactic normalizations, I'm afraid that is my sort of job for the next couple of months. Nominalized adjectives are quite hard to investigate in support verb constructions in the form of verb-object structures, particularly in kind of classical Greek, because any kind of neuter accusative can be read adverbially. So hence why I actually spared them out quite a bit when I wrote my book on literary classical Attic support verb constructions. But given that these kind of pairs, as the ones you see in 9 in the papyri, exist particularly for this frame, and given that they have to be dative, are also quite easy to identify, I think there's quite a lot more work to be done also as to what exactly the difference between the two is that you see in 9. So if that's a question you're coming up with right now, I can already disappoint you, because I will not have the answer right now. Give me 3 to 4 months, and I hope I will have an answer for you on that one. Right, and before I go over time, I will wrap up and just, as promised, very briefly loop back to the 3 research questions. So we started by talking about what makes support verb constructions withstand automated procedures of data retrieval. And I said basically the problem is that they are ambiguous, they're variable, and they are discontinuous, and this is not a Greek-specific problem. How can they, however, be retrieved in suitably large, internally homogeneous, and digitally available corpora? There I showed you my literary classical Attic corpus, which you can play around with Sketch Engine, which is obviously still a deterministic approach, but it is at least a way to retrieve quite a good number with kind of at least the option of discovery to a certain extent. And finally, we thought obviously about why are support verb constructions so difficult to identify and really let alone discover in the documentary papyri. And the answer to that is basically that they are obviously kind of already an internally heterogeneous group of constructions, but on top of that, they are also quite susceptible to any kind of diachronic, diastratic, or diatopic variation, which obviously does not really make our job easier. And this is, I think, where I will finish. Thank you very much for your attention, and any questions, comments, suggestions, and hopefully constructive criticism are more than welcome, of course.